Welcome to Situational Awareness, a podcast brought to you by Militarny.com. I am your host Valentina Kuzak, and today we'll talk to Perry Boyle. He is the CEO and co-founder of MITS Capital. He is focused on bringing more investment into Ukrainian defense tech. Whenever we meet somebody from the investment community, they say, "You should meet Perry." So today we are doing just that. Welcome to the show, Perry. We are so happy to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
We are very happy that you are supporting our podcast with being here with us today
Well,
at
it's an honor.
DefenseTech Valley 2025. And we've heard a lot about you. We interviewed some of the investors, and every investor we are talking to and asking whom else should we talk to, they always say you should talk to Perry. So we are very happy and honored to have you here. And for our international audience, I know you are quite public, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and about the fund you're running here in Ukraine.
Well, thank you. I had a very long career on Wall Street, 30 years on Wall Street. I helped run one of the largest hedge funds in the world, SAC Capital, now .72. I retired from that in 2019, and I thought, life is good. And then in February of 2022, in the full-scale invasion, I had an epiphany that World War III has occurred.
Yeah.
And I couldn't just sit idly and do nothing while Ukraine is fighting not just for Ukraine, but for the things that I really hold, the ideals that I believe in, the ideals that are fundamental to my identity, and I think fundamental to the ideals of many Americans. So I actually applied to fight in Ukraine with the International Legion. My application was rejected.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Well, I'm too old, and I have no previous military experience. And I knew that when I was filling out the application, but I was thinking, maybe they'll make me a cook or a driver or something, and I'll contribute any way I can. But somebody in the Ukrainian embassy flagged my application and looked me up on LinkedIn and said, maybe, and knew that we knew some people in common. And through that, I got introduced to my partner, Dennis Gorak, and that began our marriage situation and the eventual formation of MITS Capital in January of 2024. So our mission with MITS Capital is to bring international capital into Ukraine to invest in Ukraine's domestic defense industry and build Ukraine's domestic defense industry, with the immediate goal of getting the Russians out, but also integrating Ukraine into Europe's defense architecture and creating a very strong defense industrial base in Ukraine for when the Russians come back, because they will come back.
Right. That's what everybody is saying. Are you bringing only American capital or also European? What's the percentage of?
So we're about 50-50 European capital and then American and Ukrainian capital. So yes, it's a very international investor base. Our largest investors are from Denmark. Mm-hmm. We have investors from Germany, we have investors from the US, and investors from Ukraine. So, yeah.
Are those private investors?
It's no institutional money, all private money, because we're not a venture capital fund.
Right.
Okay, we're an investment group. Our primary goal is not near-term financial returns. Mm-hmm. It's what I was saying about building up Ukraine's defense industrial base. So we have a much longer time horizon, not 2 or 3 years or even 5 or 7 years, but decades. And we don't have a specific target return,
Right. So are those angel investors, right?
They're more substantial than angel investors. They're very wealthy families, but we do a combination. At MITS Capital, one of our projects is MITS Accelerator.
Right.
And in that, we provide seed capital to startups. They all need to have an MVP, a minimum viable product, that is deployed on the battlefield that we know that some combat unit wants. And then we run MITS Accelerator in partnership with American University in Kyiv. It's a 3-month program. Half of it's taught by American University Kyiv, half by us. And we bring in external speakers as well. And the goal is to help these startup companies understand what it means to be a company, how to do their paperwork right, how to sell into a procurement system.
So how is your cooperation with Ukrainian startups structured overall? So you are selecting the company,
Yes.
and then they are going through this training program, right?
Yes, but in the process, we commit to provide them seed capital. We commit when we accept them, not when they graduate,
Right.
which is different from the other accelerators.
Yeah, okay.
So we do our work up front, and we're investing not just in the products, but in the people, because the products become obsolete pretty quickly in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so you have to invest in a team that understands, I call it paranoia, that they wake up every day paranoid that their product is obsolete.
Outdated,
So they're
okay.
always thinking about how we can make it better or cheaper or both. So then when they graduate, we help them raise additional capital. We will often...
How exactly? Like from
Yes,
your...
we have a network of investors that we work with, and now there's a nice pool of other venture capital funds in Ukraine, and we're very happy to work with them, but we'll generally write checks between $300,000 and $3.5 million was our biggest, $3.75
For
million.
just one company?
To one company, yes. So, yes, I think we've probably written the largest single check to a Ukrainian company. That was 10 Core UGVs, robots. We announced that deal at Ukrainian Recovery Conference in Rome, and that was the first deal from an international investment group directly into a Ukrainian company, not into an Estonian company or American company, but into a Ukrainian company.
Registered in Ukraine.
Yeah, registered in the DIA.
Yeah, the defense city,
Yes.
yeah, right?
Yes, correct. In that legal structure that they have created. So we're very proud to do that. And
Because you're also supporting not a single company, but the whole infrastructure, right?
it's the system in Ukraine that is so special. Ukraine has so many advantages for defense tech. First of all, it has the history of defense. It was the component supplier in the Soviet Union for the defense industry. It was a major exporter prior to the full-scale invasion. So all this expertise exists here. I know the famous plants like Antonov.
But didn't it vanish? I mean, with all those engineers traveling.
It atrophied. It got weaker and weaker.
But you do see the institutional memory actually playing a role?
Yes, we definitely do. And then its cost structure is very competitive. Like anything you make in NATO, we can make here for 40% or less of the cost.
Yeah, and that's we also hear about UGVs, let's say, the producers.
Yes.
They say it's like 40 times less expensive compared to flagship products used in NATO countries.
Absolutely, absolutely. And part of that is because in NATO, you're generally building a product to a Ministry of Defense or a Defense Department's request for proposals, right? And so the specs on the product are very mandated by often bureaucrats and can create overkill for the product, right? Whereas Ukraine, it's really, what does this combat command need yesterday?
Yeah.
And how do we deliver that capability as quickly and as cost effectively as possible? So this leads to the third thing that does not exist in any NATO country. In Ukraine, you have a relatively strong combat commands and a relatively weak Ministry of Defense. I'm not saying it's a weak entity, but the power balance between the combat commands and the MOD here is very different than in any other NATO country, right? So,
absolutely.
like in the US, you have this massively important Pentagon, And the
And it's
combat
like a
commands just take what
really
the
massive
Pentagon gives them.
intermediate between the producers and the actual users.
Yes.
And here with this Brave One market that we even now have,
Yes.
there is like this strong connection between actual fighters and the producers. And that's what we constantly hear from the companies that are producing equipment for soldiers, that we do build this even personal connections. And that's became not only our business, but also like we have, it's like helping your brother or your sister on the ground, and
It's
that's
not
just
like
very
it is.
powerful.
It is helping your brothers. Sometimes it is the brother with the brother in the military and the brother in the factory working on the same product. That doesn't exist anywhere in NATO. And so one of the
Can
things...
it be replicated at all? I mean,
Well, they try, and so U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. Army just announced its FUSE, F-U-Z-E fund, $750 million venture capital fund,
Right.
designed to get products in the hands of the warfighter much more quickly, like maybe sometimes as soon as 10 days. That's a massive change in the right direction, and I think it's inspired by what they see happening in Ukraine. But still in the U.S., it's not the same cycle time, right?
also because they don't have this urgency that we do have, because it's all about the survival.
Yes, and a lot of the products that are being designed in Ukraine are designed by the warfighter.
Yeah.
Not by some factory, not by some bureaucrat, but by the warfighter, who's then looking for a partner to help build it, test it, and then produce it in scale. So if you're a venture capital company and you come into Ukraine saying, oh, I'm going to find this technology team, and then I'm going to move them out of Ukraine into a European country, they're still going to be great people, but they're going to be outside of the system that made them successful. And this is why everything that we do at MITS Capital is focused on doing it in Ukraine.
Right. This is very important message. And my question to you is, let's say you started in 2022, right,
Yes.
with the MITS Capital. How do you see the interest of investors evolving during that time?
Yes.
You know,
So for the first 2 years, I felt like I was pushing string. It was very difficult to raise capital, and there were not very many participants in the marketplace. Just in the past 6 months, this has exploded. And you see here at DefenseTech Valley, Brave One, this year there are 5,000 people here. Last year there were 1,000 people here. Last year there were maybe half a dozen venture capital funds here. This year there's 20. So it's the interest level in what Ukraine is doing has exploded, and it's partially because of the defense budget situation in NATO. Okay, going from 2% to 5%. I think it's a real challenge for the NATO countries to figure out, what am I going to spend that money on? Okay, I know that tanks are really drone targets. So, like, we need drones. And this incursion, the Russian attack on Chechnya last week with the drones, that had to be countered with F-35s and F-16s. It proved that NATO is not prepared for a drone attack by Russia. Yet every night in Kyiv, hundreds of drones are sent by Russia. So Ukraine is the only country that has the answer to NATO's defense problem. And this is why Ukraine must be integrated into NATO's defense architecture.
that's what I really support. The amount of investors coming here to DefenseTech Valley, how it will translate, like what's your forecast into actual investments? Because it's different. It's like a hype topic and everyone is saying, defense is sexy, you should invest. But how many
Well, it's been very low historically. So over the course of the entire, since the full-scale invasion, it's been maybe $100 million of private investment into Ukrainian companies.
Exactly.
And I think people think that it's probably more than that, but it's not. But just this week, we had a really, I think, landmark transaction announced, the Swarmer deal. Their Series A was a $15 million deal, so the single largest investor deal. And it brought in new investors several of whom have never had any investment in Ukraine, and many have no investment presence in Ukraine. They relied on the previous Ukrainian-focused investment venture capital funds to have done the real due diligence for them. That's exciting, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that occur. But there's still a lot of challenges.
What are those?
Yes, well, this one should not be underestimated, but when you're a venture capitalist and you have many opportunities in the world, and the ones in the Ukraine require you to cross the border, and that border wait can be 15 minutes or 6 hours, that's a very difficult travel situation. Plus, it is a war zone, and you do take personal risks when you come here. Now, Ukrainians face this every day.
Yeah, but they're used to that.
Yes, but I think most non-Ukrainians are overly scared about their personal safety when they come into Ukraine. Secondly, there's no exit market for venture capital investments in Ukraine. There's no IPO market, and there's no domestic buyers of Ukrainian defense companies, DefenseTech companies, okay, which I want to talk about in a minute because I have a solution for that. Third, there's no exports.
Right.
Technically, exports are permitted, but it's very difficult to export. And that without exports, you're reliant on essentially a single client, the Ukrainian government, who, if they're successful, the demand for your product will drop. So this is, I think, a very important policy problem in Ukraine. The government needs to fix this. They need to not just permit exports, but encourage exports. Of course, anything that can be used on the front line should go to the front line. But many producers in Ukraine now have excess capacity, and many of these innovations are technological that can be scaled outside of Ukraine. And Ukraine needs the money. Ukraine needs the foreign exchange. Ukraine's economy needs to keep going, and Ukraine's defense industry needs to be built up.
So this is number one priority.
Oh, number one priority, exports.
The second priority.
Yeah, I would say there is the number two priority is exports. I think once exports are permitted, there will be a lot more private capital coming into Ukraine, because I think the people will see one of the things.
Are we talking time? I mean, in 10 times?
Oh, maybe 10 to 100 times. Yes, at least one order of magnitude, maybe two. And that this is critical for Ukraine. Ukraine needs money, right? And people say, well, what do you need? You know, they know I'm coming to Ukraine. What do you need? You need more ambulances and things. Of course we need all that in Ukraine, but we need money because we can scale production in Ukraine with more money to buy CNC machines, to buy materials. This is the basic stuff that we need. And we need to do this with revenues from NATO countries.
Exactly. So please explain more in detail the logic of the investors that is considering maybe entering the market. Yeah, if the exports are open, how?
Well, once exports are open, then they can have confidence in the financial modeling of the companies they're investing in.
So they are targeting as a customers their MODs.
Yes, and then they can also validate whether the product has international demand. Right? It's very hard to know, so some products are just bought by particular Army Corps, right? So will this product survive the conflict?
But also how international demand is actually building up. As you mentioned, those cases with drones.
Because no one is buying anything from Ukraine yet, right? But I think they want to.
Don't they want to support their own producers? Because they do have
too much, though. Too much, I think. And I think that this is a problem with Europe in particular, that each country has its own national defense budget, which is used for economic stimulus as much as it is for defense.
Exactly.
So in a peacetime, that might make sense. But if we are, as I believe, in the early stages of World War III, defense should be the priority, not economic stimulus. And we don't need 10 different manufacturers in Europe of howitzers. when already Ukraine makes more howitzer guns than the rest of NATO combined.
Right.
Like, don't reinvent the Ukrainian wheel, invest in the Ukrainian
But that's
wheel.
also, to do that, you should actually do what you're saying, integrate Ukraine in the whole European defense
It's
ecosystem.
not just buy from Ukraine, it's integrate Ukraine. So Ukraine makes components, like it makes the best thermal imaging sensors in the world. It makes non-Chinese drone motors. It makes last mile targeting systems. It makes optical navigation systems. These are things, and it makes it at a fraction of the price. So yes, you can have a defense prime in the UK or France or Germany. They should be buying Ukrainian components to go into their weapons systems.
Are you seeing Europe rearming?
Are we seeing Europe rearm? That is an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if they know how to rearm. I don't, because they don't. There is so few European military representatives on the ground in Ukraine learning the true lessons of what's going on in the battlefield.
Have you encountered any here?
Yes, I have. And many of them they're not necessarily in uniform.
Of course.
And because one of the things that frustrates me is that Europe seems afraid of Russia, afraid of provoking Russia, afraid of engaging Russia, afraid of escalating with Russia. Russia does not fear Europe. Russia does not fear NATO. Russia is taking advantage of every weakness inside NATO to penetrate it. It attacks it, it cuts cables in the Baltic Sea, it does sabotage on cargo planes.
Sending drones.
It sends
to
drones
European
over the border. Like, it's testing Europe to see how prepared Europe is and how weak it is. And I think it's finding it very weak. I don't know how long, NATO has very few troops that are prepared to fight. Certainly prepared to fight a drone war, okay? There's a high reliance in NATO on air power. We have F-16s, we have F-35s, we have Gripons, we have all these planes. But if Russia gets into Vilnius, are they going to use this air power to level Vilnius, to get the Russians out of Vilnius? I don't think so. And this is the strategic tension. So one of the things that I've kind of laid out some theses. How do I live my values? How do I implement my views? And so one is through MITS Lightning Fund and our venture investment, but the other is MITS Industries. So at Brave One today, I will get on the stage and I will announce the creation of MITS Industries.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It's already registered, a Danish-Ukrainian company to create a prime defense contractor in Ukraine.
Great news.
So it'll be a merger of 3 Ukrainian companies to create something of scale, something that has the ability to export, something that has what we know Europe needs.
Can you enclose what those companies are working on?
Yes, I can. So Tencor, the ground robot company, Unwave, and Infohaz. And each one brings something special. They're all about the same size. This is not an acquisition of MITS acquiring these companies. This is a merger of those companies coming together because they believe in this mission and in the importance of what they're doing for Ukraine for the long term. So this will be a platform company, and then we invite other companies to join. We'll make small tuck-in acquisitions, and it's the perfect marriage of Danish capital with the Ukraine DefenseTech base.
Where exactly is the production? So will they be working on production in Ukraine?
In Ukraine, primarily in Ukraine, but we will produce some things in Denmark as well. With
the components?
Components, maybe some maritime things. Denmark has an excellent maritime history. So let's use the competitive advantages of each country and marry them together to get the best warfighting products to deter and defend against Russia.
Can you expand more on what the amount of investment for that platform would be? And
well, I have to be careful because we're still raising capital, and U.S. and European restrictions on projections and things. But it will be a company with several hundred million in revenues and 1,000 employees. Like it'll be a real substantial
thing.
company, and it's not the end; it's the start, and it's the start of something, and it solves a problem. It solves the problem of a pathway into Europe for Ukrainian defense tech companies whose only alternative right now is to leave Ukraine, which is terrible. And it provides an exit strategy for venture-backed companies that that need to be acquired, that aren't going to scale into being real companies. So I've done this before. I've created rolled-up companies in the United States in different industries in the 90s. And so I'm very confident that we can make this very successful. And it's going to work for our Danish investors, and it's going to work for our Ukrainian defense tech companies. And we invite other Ukrainian companies to join us, and we invite other investors, not necessarily just Danish, could be American, could be UK, could be German, could be Nordic countries, to join this, because we're going to create this defense prime for the defense of Europe, and Ukraine is the front line for the defense of Europe. So it has to be here.
Are you seeing the interest of the investors from other countries evolving as we see since 2022?
Well, right now, I'd say so.
Especially in this context of shifting powers between Europe and US.
Yes. So the U.S. has been very clear to Europe that they need to pay for their own defense, and Europe, I think, is willing to do that,
but doesn't know how to.
But doesn't necessarily know how to, and hasn't engaged in a war, thank God, in almost a century. And sadly, the largest country in Europe is Ukraine, and this is the one. Putin wants Ukraine not just for all the cultural reasons, all the political reasons. He wants its military capacity. Okay, look what he's acquired militarily in eastern Ukraine already, and using those factories to produce material to fight against Ukraine, and manpower. Like, he's drafting unwilling people into the Russian army. Just imagine if you had all of Ukraine, like, to use that.
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario.
This is the worst case scenario. So Ukraine, to me, is the test. It's the test for the liberal, free countries, whether they're going to stand up for their values and their system, or they're going to let the autocracies chip away at it, and the collapse of the system that's so important to human progress, I think.
Exactly, and it's so sad that not everyone understands that, and people are investors. I kind of do understand that their key goal is basically to get the return on investment.
Yes.
And when we are talking with different investors, companies, they are, saying about values, that we have to promote this idea of investing in defense because it's about values and about protecting our democracies. Yeah. However, it seems to me that it's really hard to get this message through. And that's why we are trying to do that with you together, like with products like this, communication products.
Yes.
And I wanted to end on with your reflection on DefenseTech Valley 2025. Yes. What are your key takeaways? Because we are on the middle of the second day. Mm-hmm. So what are you taking out with you today?
Well, it's very interesting because 2 years ago, if you saw the exhibition hall, you'd literally see drones that had like duct tape and flex ties holding them together. And now the products look very slick, very professional. Last year, when I was on stage, I asked how many people in the audience had written a check to a Ukrainian defense tech company, and only 4 hands went up. Wow. Okay, there were 600 people in the room, but only 4 hands went up. This year, I think a lot, when I ask that question, I know that a lot more than 4 hands will go up. And I think you can see if it's 5,000 people this year, what's it going to be next year? Because I do believe that there will be a defense tech value next year, a necessity for it. And I think there'll be much more capital flowing into Ukraine as people see the need for this. Putin Putin has been the catalyst. Finland joined NATO for a reason, right? And Putin attacked Poland for a reason. Poland has to wake up, and they need drones. I mean, they need counter drones. They need what Ukraine deploys every day in scale that does not exist in NATO. So it has to happen, and they can't retool fast enough. To get to this point, it's taken Ukraine 3.5 years, okay? Do they have 3.5 years in Poland? Do they have 3.5 years in Finland? Do they have 3.5 years in Estonia? Maybe.
Maybe not.
But maybe not. And so speed is critical.
Let's hope for the better.
Yes.
Let's meet definitely next year
Yes,
here in
please.
the same place and reflect.
Oh, I can't wait.
What
I
is
can't
happening.
wait.
It was a great conversation. Thank you, Perry.
Thank you so much.